Beach milk.
Beach milk?
Bajmalk?
milk?
Bajmalk?
Badger's milk. Sometimes the file names for the raw files that become these episodes have interesting titles, and Abe chose to call, I think, the template or an email attachment Beach Milk. And that lets you know what we're talking about today if he thinks about it. Hey everyone, it's Michael Swaim inviting you to join us, why don't you, for a Frame Rate, the show where we rate frames. You here with me, buddy? Are you here in the dark?
I'm here.
Hooray!
I'm here. Hey,
My buddy
yeah.
came. What's your name, dude?
I'm Abe Epperson. I'm the other co-host.
You coined the phrase Beach Milk.
Beach milk.
Thanks for that. In reference to being John Malkovich, which I gotta say, frankly, in a lot of ways, is my Star Wars.
Really?
And I'll explain what I mean by that after we introduce our very special guest, who, of course, you know who it is. He's got to be back because we're talking Charlie Kaufman.
Anytime,
Everyone,
Kaufman.
Brooksy's back.
It's Brooks Brown, babies. Hey, dude.
Thank you for having me, gentlemen. Thank you so much. And of course, I'm back. You wrote me this nice little note saying, hey, there's another Kaufman movie. And by the way, there are others, if you haven't realized. We still need to talk about, but of course I'm going to show up for this one. Jesus.
Full disclosure.
Try to get your job before you've done your job.
Right, that's right. No, I say go for it. Overreach, man. Stretch for the stars.
Stretch.
We're the stars. This almost, if we were less cowardly and more, intellectually courageous, would have been I'm thinking of leaving you or whatever it was called.
Why?
Because I think that we thought that film. Wait, what is it? I'm thinking of leaving.
No.
I'm thinking of ending things.
Yes.
Boom. Got it. Because that's the more recent release, Kaufman release. And I think it was intellectually very challenging and abstract and somewhat diffuse in the way that it was Kaufman at the end of his, like, he's full Kaufman, you know? Right now in real life, we're living through an era of Kaufman as Kaufman. Whereas I would argue that being John Malkovich is Kaufman coupled with Spike Jonze, which is a very important factor, also trying to make something that would earn him the acceptance of Hollywood and like the career that he now enjoys. Like it was a 1-2 punch between being John Malkovich and adaptation, sort of got him where he is today, so to speak.
And you're arguing that that's less courageous.
I'm arguing that it's less courageous of us to cover being John Malkovich or smarter is another way to put it, because more people enjoyed being John Malkovich than will enjoy I'm thinking of ending things. That's all I was getting at.
Despite the fact that I will actually argue now, having watched, I think, all of these movies now multiple times, even recently.
Sure.
I'm thinking of ending things is maybe his best outside of Synecdoche, New York. I actually have really, really grown to love that.
And I'm interested to find out about that someday.
But for now, let's talk about
Let's get back to the episode we're talking about.
I will agree with you with the idea that being John Malkovich, I won't say it's a more mainstream pick. It's for sure as a movie. It is still pure Kaufman. It is still super weird and super amazing for what it is. So, but it is not nearly the mainlining. It's Kaufman cut with Spike Jonze. It's not Kaufman purely melted down and snorted.
It's not.
Yes. And what
That's
else?
right.
And I wasn't kidding. That really was my takeaway watching it this time is, like, we just covered Dark City, which was a movie that has been a favorite of mine forever and I've wanted to cover on this show for a long time. And when we finally covered it, I was like, this is very good. But watching it as an adult, the luster wears off a little, mainly because there's long expository sequences. And now that I'm an adult, like as a little kid, I appreciated those. But as an adult, I'm like, let's skip through this exposition. But I'm not kidding around when I say this is my Star Wars. I remember being a kid, my dad taking me as a kid to see Being John Malkovich in theaters for some weird reason, which is probably why I am the way I am. But, it blew my mind in terms of, like, for my money, this was the movie that hit me at the right age that made me realize that film could be, Brazil made me feel this way too. Film could be a fanciful wonderland of like, who knows what's going to happen next, that's like spectacular from beginning to end. And I loved this movie immediately. I still love it, even though watching it again for the purposes of this podcast, in some ways, as I say, I see it as like structurally more, it's less self-indulgent, let's say. Like, Abe, do you like this one better than the Kaufmans we've covered in the past?
Yes. Okay, so when we were talking about the 100% Colombian Kaufman, like, I love the 60% cut version. Like, to me, this adaptation, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, now we're talking, baby. This is perfect Kaufman.
So Kaufman tempered by another strong artistic voice.
Yes,
because Eternal Sunshine's Gondry. Yeah,
I think that he has flaws the deeper he goes in. I think rather it's more like my kind of unified theory of Kaufman is that it's more playful. The more playful he is, the more he is the guy that wrote The Simpsons, or like was a writer for The Simpsons, was a writer for, you know, like when he did like sketches and stuff, you know, like what else did he write for? Seinfeld.
I did. You're blowing my mind right now. I didn't know he wrote for The
Larry
Simpsons.
Sanders Show, Dana Carvey Show. Yeah, he worked with like Louis C.K., Robert Smigel,
Those guys,
Stephen Colbert. Like that was his start. And the more he kind of conceived of the world as like, how could I do simple like sketch jokes? And that was a part of his DNA. The better. The more when he's like trying to look into the deepest depths of the soul, I think it gets away from him. But he's so very good with structure and all the things that you guys are saying. I'm not going to take away from the fact that like I really like this movie.
Yeah. All right.
More
So
than the
hard
others.
disagree, except about that last thing you said about liking the movie. Brooks, could you tell the uninitiated in a nutshell what you think Being John Malkovich is about?
What it's about or what happens in the film, because this is one of the reasons I like this, and I prefer it heavily to say Spotless Mind as an example, is it is a film that is absolutely, and anyone can agree, it's visually its own thing. It's stunning. It's a movie, but the implications of it and what it's trying to get across, what is the nature of being John Malkovich, the nature of being ourselves, being anybody? Are we as an ego, as a centered ego, do we have such a thing that is controlling us like a puppet? Is that a thing that we could, in theory, just sort of displace and replace with something else? Or is there something more complicated that makes us who we are?
And you think that
so
this film investigates that?
This is the movie. This is the whole movie.
I
But
would
you
say so in the same way that it's a proto-synecdoche in some ways, or as even though it is simpler, what stood out to me is the way it's very allegorical. For example, Maxine. So we should at some point say what happens in the film, because I don't think everyone will have seen it.
That's what I was saying.
Go for it.
We need to start somewhere, so we have like a basis. So the core sort of underlying thing here is this guy Craig, and it's John Cusack. He's a shitty puppeteer who kind of doesn't have a job. He goes and finds a portal inside of a rather extraordinary building, the way that it's set up, that allows him to literally like see out of the eyes of John Malkovich for a bit and then end up in the Jersey Turnpike. Like that's the point. That's the plot of the movie.
Like actually be John Malkovich though, like feel his sensations, kind of be a passenger.
Well, I mean, this is the question. We will get
I mean,
to
they
that.
literally say that in the movie, right?
I know they do, but I don't.
Okay.
I think that's a phrasing thing. I think there's questions to be had there. But regardless,
Okay.
so it's a story of him learning
Depends
what
what your definition of is.
Man.
It does.
he tells this girl he likes, or and then it becomes this sort of large scale, exploration of people going in and out of John Malkovich's body and trying to find themselves in it. Ultimately, they find out that this portal and the whole thing is set up by a guy who's kind of been jumping in and out of bodies for a while because that's how he's become immortal. And, Malkovich is the next one. And it's kind of the story of how that gets out of control as people start to learn how to actually become John Malkovich and take it over for more than 15 minutes at a time.
Right.
And kind of play within that. And it's,
that would be the last bit would be the I guess the arc that happens with Dr. Lester, which
the prestige, if you will.
He was the guy who made the building. He also found the portal, and it's not just John Malkovich, though it is at this time. There's a kind of, and I'm sure we're going to unpack this a little bit more. I'm sure it seems like it's rife with meaning.
There's a little
system
fantasy
in place
system. Yeah.
Where at 44 years old, the mind that is currently in the portal, you can take over if you're there when they turn 44. And it's just random, like, don't know why, but that's just true.
By the way, who do you think?
And then it kind of switches to another person, usually a child.
Yeah.
When they reach, I guess, 44.
Who do you think drew that artwork? Lester himself or one of his progenitors? Like, who painstakingly drew that book with the vessel and the instructions?
I think it's probably one of his acolytes. The people that he's going to bring with him.
Yeah, I guess. I'd love a whole... Well, I wouldn't...
maybe he's good at it.
Love this because there'd be no point to it, but I wonder what kind of weird, freaky cult shit Lester... Because that's a power dynamic. I mean, come on, you gave them immortality. And your true identity, because he says, I'm Captain so-and-so, who we saw in the in the orientation video. So he's actually like a guy from the age of northeastern whaling who bought this building. Like, that's who he originally was. He's still that guy. Another quick question, just to get the technicalities out of the way. So their child becomes the next vessel. The child ultimately produced by Malkovich's semen while Lottie was inside his body, connected to Maxine's womb. That produces a child, and that child's the vessel. So does that imply that... I don't think it's just any child. I'm just wondering, was the previous vessel John Malkovich's parents? Like, is the Malkovich line the line? It's been the Malkoviches the whole time, and he just happens to be famous?
Well, so I would take issue with the idea that maybe necessarily it's Malkovich's DNA. I know. Just let me finish.
Is it Lottie's DNA?
Well, so this is, I mean, the implication of the scene where all of this is explored is that the child is from when Maxine and Lottie had sex. Well, Lottie was Malkovich.
Was in Malkovich, yeah.
And the child that comes out, they make points to show that it definitely doesn't look like Malkovich. Like, he's got a very distinct look and feel, and the child has soft features. And again, this is stuff that Kaufman, I know, cares about.
All children have soft features. Come on.
My point would be that we've got literally the whole film is about how everyone can start looking like Malkovich. They make it a point, because it's Jones who's filming the entire thing and directing it, to make people look literally like him. And we don't do that with the child, who in theory could actually be his progenitor. So I think there's...
But
I didn't necessarily run with that the same way. I think
But that interpretation would... Then there's no... I don't like that either, because then there's no logic as to who is the vessel why. That would just mean... it was them at random, or at random it was that child. Why is it the child that's so intimately involved in his story?
Right, it's telling us there's a system. At 44 years of age, this happens. Well, while you're saying that information, you're like, also this child is the vessel.
New vessel. I'm just saying, why that child?
Why
and does that imply
that
Malkovich's parents were the vessels before?
I think it's intentionally... I don't give a shit. This is not important.
I think that's the answer,
bullshit.
is that he would say, this is not a sci-fi movie. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But just because we're ex-cracked people, I have to do one more and then I'm done with this shit. Mm-hmm. But wouldn't the two moms know that when their child turns 44, anyone could wander into that portal and become it? Even before then, couldn't people go into the Lester building and become their child? Wouldn't they want to shut the portal down or something? They don't seem concerned about shutting the portal down. None of this matters, right?
Not
That's
at
what
all.
Kaufman
they
would
don't
say.
seem to care at all.
It's very confusing to me. Yeah.
But yeah, okay, let's move beyond the system because it's not about the system. But as Brooks alluded to I think what's so fascinating about it and what Kaufman does so well is he stacks density of symbology to the fucking rafters, dude. So as Brooks alluded to, I think it's the point of the film, or the most satisfying thing I took away, was this idea that, because the people are archetypes, right? Like Maxine is the betrayer. She's not really a fully rounded character, played beautifully by Catherine Keener.
Oh, my favorite.
God, she's great.
I think the best.
She's
next to Malkovich himself, like the best performance in the thing.
And
yeah, for sure.
Is this not Malkovich's best role maybe ever? And he's one of the best actors ever. And he's done Hamlet and shit, but I don't know. This is pretty fucking good.
It's pretty fun.
And honestly, I will say, I don't think it's possible. Like, and I don't mean this to be like an ass. I don't think it's possible that this film would be as good if it wasn't someone as, like, specifically with the qualities that John Malkovich has as an actor, as being a fucking weirdo.
It had to be John
Malkovich. And that's the part that's like, how?
How'd they get him? And he's so good.
Like he talks about it that like he actually
his imitation of John Cusack is spot on. He does a face off with.
He's incredible. But if it was like if it was being anybody else, I don't even know if the film would even land.
And the studio itself was considering. It was pitched many times back at Kaufman and company that we use someone else, a bigger, person. I think famously they said, like, why can't it be fucking Bean Tom Cruise? Because that would get more money, because it would have Tom Cruise in the title.
Boy.
You could have done Being Christopher Walken.
They were like, no.
Being Christopher Walken might have worked. It has to be like that kind of...
Yeah, it has to be.
Although I have a hard time believing Christopher Walken could impersonate anyone.
No, I mean, no, he does Christopher Walken as his impersonation.
I think it's because we have this conception of Malkovich having the soul of an artist. Yeah. Whereas I'm pretty sure we have this conception of, Christopher Walken is the soul of like a
weirdo,
a scarecrow or something,
right?
Like something that makes no sense to us.
But the symbology point is, it's about a puppeteer. That's that's the most obvious, right? It's about being a soul in someone's body and eventually making a puppet of them. But all the plot points involve some aspect related to that theme that complexifies it. Right. For example, Elijah is a monkey. That blurs, monkeys blur the line to some in the classic debate between where is the line, what has a soul and what doesn't have a soul. There's a bird that talks, which is also a tricky proposition when you're arguing about what has a soul, what has sentience. He ends up putting his wife in a cage, controlling and constraining people's movements. And I know you go, but my point is simple, and it is simple, yes, but the layering and elegant connecting of simple symbols to an extreme, I think, is still impressive in a virtuosic way. And I think this achieves that, where it's like you can watch the movie and just think it's a funny idea for a comedy that's weird and offbeat. But then you also realize, if you want to, that the 7.5th floor, that's literally also on the theme of constraining your movements. Like, architecture dictates the way in which our sentience navigates. Yes, that's simple, but it's crazy the slavish attention to making everything fall under the banner of the theme that you're working with. And basically that just leads me to like this trance-like state where I'm sitting there watching the movie, meditating on where does my consciousness reside? Like something interesting that I ended up Googling after watching this, and I think this is what was great about the movie and meditations on this topic of like puppetry. I was looking up, because I don't know about you fellas, but I feel like my consciousness resides behind my eyes. And I believe earlier we referred to someone as looking out of Malkovich's eyes, which I guess is implied by a camera also. But the optic nerve, just because sight is such our primary sense, and I think because the other things are attached to our head, you think of your consciousness as residing in your head. But I was wondering if someone born blind and deaf feels their consciousness as residing in their fingertips. And indeed, there's some stuff online about maybe some people claim that they do. But anyway, the point is this movie led me to a deep meditation on consciousness, how you can dissect consciousness, where consciousness is, if it is at all, as Neutral Milk Hotel said, how strange it is to be anything at all, and like where, you know, whether that can shift around, like Brooks was saying. And so I'm done like lauding it, but I think that's what it does. My proposition is basically Being John Malkovich takes an obvious symbol, which is puppetry, as a analog for controlling our human bodies, and then broadens it and generalizes it and applies it to everything so thoroughly that that's an interesting exercise.
Well, I really like
No, go ahead.
And I just wanted to throw in, because I know Brooks he's champing at the bit, but
a little bit.
But I just wanted to throw in what I liked about it. While we're doing that, I like that this whole thing feels like a 2012 sketch, like internet comedy sketch, late internet comedy sketch. It unravels things by picking the most literal threads, like having John Malkovich enter his own brain, or having that section where it goes like 8 years later, and then we just assume that the couple, Maxine and, you know, like that they have worked everything out and they're now living as John Malkovich. Not only that, there's genuinely hilarious moments like the one you alluded to earlier with the monkey, where he has a flashback that reveals the psychological trauma that just seemed like a throwaway line earlier in the movie. Like we look through the eyes of the monkey and see this little like documentary film. These
It
are
reads
the
like
impulses.
a Simpsons joke. Yeah,
exactly.
For sure. Yeah.
Exactly. There's a few times that's exactly right. And it's more playful than most Kaufman movies, I think. Maybe Adaptation is his masterpiece in this regard. But I don't know. I just think that there's a systemic, like there's an involvement that this film does on like kind of the cellular level of the script of like, I'm gonna keep zigging and zagging, that makes me okay, this is something I can actually bite into, because it's not only is it funny, but it makes me like enjoy like the people on screen and enjoy the actual like medium, but also I don't have to sit and dwell on some of the ideas like I do in the other films. I do like meditative film, but I do think that his concepts are not necessarily as broad in this movie as some of other films that necessitate the meditation. Does that make sense?
No, totally. The sketch escalation is an amazing observation. And then I'm going to shut up for so long, Brooks, I swear. But
no, you're good, Michael. Because your point that you made, and I think Abe's point, it falls right into what I was going to say, which I'll just say really quickly, which is that this film, and the reason I liked it when it came out, and I actually think I like it less now, it was one of my favorites the first time I saw it. I was like, holy shit. Just like you, it wasn't my Star Wars. My dad didn't take me, but like this was like, wait, what? Like you can do what with movies? Like I was young, it was weird, and it was like, okay, this is different.
Mm-hmm. And it wasn't like Synecdoche, where as a kid you'd be like, is life that grim? Is that how depressing shit is going to be? It's not necessarily. I actually don't even
find Synecdoche that depressing. That's awful.
Okay, I do. No, my point is, and I think you see why most people would, but this one is not. But go ahead.
Well, no. Well, this one is not. But I would say the concepts in it and the philosophical ideas that it's trying to get across are incredibly simple, and they're very base level. It's they do a lot of things in this that he doesn't do in other of his films. This and Eternal Sunshine are the only films really where the concept is about having sort of a centered ego, a pure subject, a soul as a thing. All the other movies are more about multiplicities and playing with the idea of becoming as its own thing rather than as a centered subject. So this is stuff that is very broad, very basic at a core level, but how to put it? As you start getting into, let's say, because my thing for the last year, I've spent breaking down the works of Deleuze and Guattari and playing through the idea of the not only decentered subject, but that the subject comes after who I really am and that I barely exist through a multiplicity and a whole bunch of other types of philosophical thinking that I've fallen in love with. And this was like, hey, this is a cool movie. But the philosophy just doesn't hit me in the same way as it did, because it was more, I don't want to say basic, but I think that's a fair way to put it.
Is this a way to put it? I feel like as a storyteller, Kaufman designs fractals in a lot of ways, and this is that fractal, just it's only crenellated one or two nodes, versus like you zoom way in and you get a Synecdoche, New York that's highly fractalized. This
I
one
would say, I don't even know if I would say this one's necessarily fractalized. This one's more like Anomalisa, that's also not fractal. That is,
I really think the pairing is shine of the spot. I mean, everyone picks different words to emphasize, but because it's about, like you said, this one and that one both assume there's a soul and give you a simple fable like, what if your soul worked like this? Let's see how that would go. Let's escalate at one level. I think Abe was spot on with the sketch escalation description. And then like, here's a way to twist it that you didn't think of. What if he went in his own portal? Which, by the way, that is the equivalent of the joke that every young comedy writer always pitches first when they like top 10 things to stuff in a turkey, another smaller turkey.
That's exactly the joke I was thinking of,
yeah, totally, dude. And this one and Eternal Sunshine are kind of, I think, along that basic level, but he's showing his chutzpah and his skill in the execution of the thing. And like this movie has lines in it or runs in it that I think are as impressive as Simpsons runs. I think my favorite moment in the entire movie, it's not crystallized into one line. It's a run of lines. It's, I can't give up the portals, sir. It's my livelihood. It's my head, Schwartz. It's my head. I'll see you in court. What makes you think I won't be seeing what you're seeing when you see me in court? Heads up, Malkovich. Ping. Fuck. The addition of the Simpsons-like runner that then someone driving by throws a can at his head, and they know that it's John Malkovich. They say, heads up, John Malkovich. Yeah. Amazing.
That
amazing. And
it's Simpsons.
And he does not, like, if you look at, I'm thinking of going over there, or I keep forgetting the name of his most
thinking of
recent
ending
one.
things.
Thinking of ending things. Man, there's no jokes like that in it.
No, I don't even know if there's a joke. But I would also say one of the things, and this
Jesse Plemons has moments of levity, but go on.
Not like the hey,
not
Malkovich.
like this.
No.
Or
the looking around the restaurant and everyone turning into him. Like,
hey,
like
Malkovich.
There's some amazing moments, but I'll take another step. So as I finished this last night, I was just like, oh God, because I actually have some negative thoughts on the film. Like I loved this film. I really did. And I've watched so much other of Kaufman stuff and a lot of other things. And with this film specifically stands in a place where Kaufman has a lot of characters I don't necessarily like, but I feel for. I don't like or feel for anyone in this movie.
No, it's just a big, loud, dumb fable like Star Wars. That's kind of what I mean by comparing it to Star Wars.
I agree with you. I also don't care for most Kaufman protagonists.
Yeah, but it's not even that I don't
like.
Par
for the course.
Let's take. I'm thinking of ending things, which we'll talk about another time. But very simply, that's not a protagonist that you end up liking. Like no one in the world will like him.
Nor Anomalisa. Yeah,
same thing. There's aspects of in Synecdoche where the characters, you will not like them, but you feel their humanity and you kind of like either pity or you
understand them.
Yeah, you have moments where you're like, you get it. Never once in this film. Like it was from the beginning this time around, I was fairly disconnected through most of it. And I think
I feel like
Charlie Sheen, I think, is the first person in it that like felt human to me. And which is fucking weird. But
Charlie Sheen lives in a grounded reality.
I think Malkovich feels human.
Oh, Malkovich does as well.
Malkovich does degree, too. Yeah. Fair. But also like there's a level of the comedy that you're speaking of undoes a lot of that for me, where it is at no point inside of the film do they make an excuse or a reason that things are going to be slapsticky comedy funny. And I like the humor, but it doesn't. it doesn't do anything for me this time around. Like, it made me laugh, and I still like really loved the visuals, and I've like at a eminent sensational level, I really enjoy parts of this movie. But thinking about it, the philosophy isn't as interesting as it once was. The characters I kind of don't like, and also kind of don't even like care about. Like, they kind of, if all of this switched, if at the end of the entire movie, everyone like musical chairs rotated a position in terms of how everything resulted, it changes nothing, and that's not good.
Well, then you got that Futurama episode with the Harlem Globetrotters where they all swap brains.
Oh, that's a great episode. The what you're saying, Brooks? That's how I feel about most Kaufman movies. Like
finally, I get to be Abe on this one. I'll be the Abe.
That's the thing. I like this movie for what it is, which is like kind of that slapstick. Like it's kind of an important film in this grand scheme of things. We kind of mentioned that.
There's shades of I think it set a whole tributary. Like, this is the one that identified this dark comedy tone that other people have come in the wake of. I think there are a lot of indie films. Like, I'm trying to think of the one.
I would actually, really quick, I would add a one modifier to that, because to me, this is the first time where we could, and Spotless Mind did the same thing, where like indie film had a new meaning. Like, prior to this, indie films were seen as literally that, like a dude with an 8mm camera, or like, this was big name actor, super weird, really high production value, theatrical release that I could go to with friends who I don't go see indie films with. Like, this was like that elevation of this that honestly changed, I think, like, it's an important film in terms of like the meta narrative of what film is.
Yeah, and even though I'm having trouble thinking of my ideal example, which is a Jesse Eisenberg movie where he works at a mundane office building and he starts to realize there's another guy who also is played by Jesse Eisenberg who works there. But my point is, it created a subgenre of indie film and elevated them to the public consciousness for sure, which was like the dark fable. I know they existed before, but it is a film that helped popularize the dark, weird fable. And
I can agree with that. A film like Enemy wouldn't exist without that.
Yeah, I agree.
Also, on the other spectrum, the power of the pitch. This is the Unpitchable movie. They talk about it. There's a whole story and kind of behind the scenes about just like, there's no movie like this before. How do you get like a studio to like give you money? And it was, wrought with a lot of problems, and it got very lucky because they were already pretty well connected into the, Hollywood underbelly. But that's less interesting. I think it's more interesting that the fact that this pitch got delivered to people, and people were at a point in like 1999, we're at a point where they were like, I'm receptive to this. But I don't believe that you get something like the recent like Psycho Gorman or something like that without something like this.
The meta of it all,
the idea where the pitch itself is like, wouldn't it be fucking crazy? Or like like most, like the career of Nicolas Cage currently, like you wouldn't get that shit because people fell in love with this idea of like, fuck it. What is this movie? What is this fucking movie? Like, why is this movie being made? To some extent, Snakes on a Plane, it's a seminal postmodern
It's flash
work.
Paper.
It's flash paper. It's just this idea of that you can just have a bunch of fun. I know that you had comedies doing that, and this is a comedy, but it's the idea that you can dress up a comedy like something completely else, not even say it's a comedy. This is not, this is Spinal Tap. This is like, this feels like something like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Feels like kind of like, wait, this is like a romance? Is this kind of
even
like
Eternal
Harold
Sunshine
like, what is this?
Feels safer because it's still hermetically sealed in a little fantasy universe. The meta aspect was so spectacular at the time. I think it's hard to appreciate maybe if you're like listening to this and you're in your early 20s, but like they're saying, which is so dumb to say because it seems so old hat now, but it's like, you couldn't pitch that, or a thing that's recursive with the name of the actor in the title. Why would we invade their life like that? Or their life, they must play a character. This was one of the first times they were like, fuck it, a movie could be anything. A part of it will be real or quote unquote real, you know, Sacha Baron Cohen style, essentially. Like John Malkovich will play
100%.
himself, but he won't be himself. That was not really done widely, or definitely not with this big of a name or budget behind it.
Well, and I'll say in terms of structure, that's the other thing that this does not have. I mean, it does in itself, but in terms of like,
have structure, but
put it up against like Eternal Sunshine as an example.
Yeah.
Eternal Sunshine has like a 3-act simplistic structure. My mom loves that movie. Nothing against my mom. That's great. She loves it. It's a good film. But this is not a film to follow. Like,
this is not a Saves the Cat, you know.
No, not at all. Exactly.
Sid Field.
No, it's
Like,
more like 5 sketches in a row with different escalating premises.
It's like Mr. Show, which
Yeah.
she wrote on,
Yeah.
by the way.
Oh, I didn't know
So,
that.
yeah.
I mean, just like
didn't he
Deadpool
write
2.
and take part in the greatest Mr. So sketch, which was the pre-taped call-in show?
I think yes.
Which is
I
it
think
is
so.
actually one of the best comedy sketches I've ever seen, in my opinion. I don't care. What
I don't know
anyone
if he was a part of it, but exactly. But
It's up there.
I do know that he was like there for those years.
For other
that
weird comparisons, which I noticed for some reason this movie brought out, I guess because I secretly think it is more influential than we give it credit for, but it's got a Brad Pitt
We just
cameo.
said we just said it's a seminal film for
I know,
all of
and-
cinema. How is
Wait.
that not giving enough credit?
Yeah.
Which is why don't you see? That's why these comments go here. I'm filing things correctly. I'm going through my notes and shoveling all the stuff that supports that. It's got an amazing Brad Pitt cameo for comedic effect, which I think also could be one of the earliest ones in this. That is now a hallowed tradition. Is Brad Pitt is so famous that the joke is, why would he stoop to just do this 5-second bit? You know, Deadpool 2 comes to mind, but there have been several key uses of Brad Pitt in film in this exact way, where you're like, cut to Brad Pitt for 5 seconds. Why the fuck would Brad Pitt get out of bed for this movie to just be here? And this has a great one when Catherine Keener is like hogging the paparazzi at the red carpet, and it just pans over, and it clearly was supposed to be Brad Pitt's shot, and he's like, I don't know who that was, but whatever. And there's of course the Team America connection, but I also think there's a bit of Inception with them eventually going into Malkovich's subconscious to try and alter. That opens up a whole can of conceptual worms that the movie doesn't even explore that much, because now being in John Malkovich also can involve, like what Dreams May Come, being in scenes from his childhood.
Yeah, you're in his subconscious.
But they
I
don't
think
go
they
into
say.
it that much. But yeah, that's enough about how seminal it is. Brooks, if that's all right with you.
No. I was just laughing because when I thought you were referring to us when you said because we just don't give it enough credit. I'm like, how the fuck can we give it more credit?
I mean, historically, I still think society doesn't.
Oh no, that's for sure. But this is one of those movies that again will take a long time before people recognize that. But I think personally, I stand by. This is the movie that made it so suburban people and, you know, normal white people could get into weird films. This is what did that.
That's true. But
it was a movement, but Spike Jonze was a part of that movement. But yeah, this one was like, they knocked it out of the park and everyone kind of saw it, you know?
yeah.
Yes.
There are two things, because you guys were talking about the things you don't like. I think it's kind of a perfect movie, which Abe probably will think is weird, but there were only two things I flagged that I don't like, or that I think modern day sophisticated Kaufman, let's call him, wouldn't have done. One is the line, soon John Malkovich will be just another puppet hanging by my workbench, which feels like Kaufman literally just caving and going, I'll throw in them saying the theme just in case everyone's dumb.
Right.
And he doesn't seem to do that these days. For example, I know a lot of people who didn't like I'm Thinking of ending things because they don't understand what happened. And Kaufman does not lead you through down the primrose path anymore. And then along the same lines, I just don't like how they used a quick television news montage to explain all the shit that happened with Malkovich, but that does support the main revelation that I'm going to come away from this whole episode with, which is that that's also very Simpson-y. That you cut to a card that says 6 months later, and you cut to, the news anchor going like, "I'm Kent Brockman. John Malkovich is a famous puppeteer now." Yeah. I had no idea that he had that specific background in all the shows I love, like Mr. Show and Dana Carvey Show. So
yeah, he was a comedy writer.
That's very interesting and makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. And just makes me love him even more. It also makes me wonder what kind of weird, dark movies George Meyer would have made if we forced him.
Dude, I used to let me tell you how much I liked Charlie Kaufman, and it's probably weird to if you guys have listened to our Kaufman series, as in
we have a ghost
our
series
conversations
now, yeah.
with Brooks. He's one of the reasons I got into comedy. He's definitely, Michael, the reason that I got into the MQ, which for people who didn't know, that was the UCSD version of like The Onion. And it's because I read once after I'd seen like this movie, after I'd seen Adaptation, that I was like, oh, immediately, like in my life, I was like gotta know everything about Charlie Kaufman. And what they said is his early thing that he did is he joined the National Lampoon and wrote like articles.
Yeah.
And I was like, I gotta write comedy articles. And it's just so funny that like as soon as I like got the comedy bug, he stopped having the comedy bug, and I was like immediately like, yeah, your stuff's less. I like the
then
old
he became
stuff.
the serious bug.
Yeah, but that's just me.
God, I laughed so hard in this that I'm fat, I'm sad, and I'm fat, and it's $200. Oh, great.
Yeah.
It's
Earl
so
Brown,
sketchy. Like now I'm seeing it as Simpsons characters. Like it could easily have been.
No,
a
now
Simpsons
you've
film.
actually
It's
now
interesting.
fully ruined the film for me.
You don't like that it has some of the moments are Simpson-y.
Like, dude, I love The Simpsons, and I laugh at the movie, but it is like, here, I'll say it this way. Being able to break apart a Kaufman movie into a series of tropes is not a thing you should be able to do, and it's not a thing I thought we would be able to do with this, but slowly it's happening in front of me.
What is it, fucking magic? Like, what do you mean? Everything should be able to be broke down.
Feel free to break down. We've done it. We tried with Synecdoche as a very simple example. We can break it down, but the meaning and all of the other stuff that really drives that, there's complexity and oddness there. I'm thinking of ending things. I'm thinking of ending
when
things.
we're talking about if it's
I would argue
he's stars,
he's only captured that once or twice, and they're the ones you just said. This is more terrestrial than divine, but that's okay.
Yes.
It's still good.
Not
It's
fighting
okay.
any of that.
Don't
Not
get
fighting any of
sad.
that.
No. Point well said. I just think it's to say it ruins it for you is a little.
I was already in a bad place with this because I finished it, and it's like I remember, and I was so excited. It's been a while since I watched it, and I really, really loved this film. Like, it left me with an interesting, confused. I remember being kind of moved in a confusing, uncomfortable way by the movie. Like I
remember leaving the theater and I felt like I saw something that wasn't dirty, but was more adult than I was supposed to see. And I was really, and yet it wasn't like scary. Cause like at that age, like sex stuff felt dangerous, but this just felt confusing, but not like repelling confusing, just very interesting. And I was fascinated with the movie.
And I think that girl
ever
at the
since,
beginning of the movie, right, who's watching the puppet show on the street, and her dad punches John
fuck
Cusack.
you, man. Yeah.
Hey, fuck you.
That emotion I had, I did not have again. And I think there's a sadness, I think, for me that comes with that, because I haven't revisited, and I haven't watched Eternal Sunshine in 10 years, at least.
I think it's because the philosophical question it begs, well, I mean, it's just where I stand, and it's just a gut feeling because I can't prove it, because there's dark matter and shit out there, and who knows what that means. But the thing that you could dig into with it at its core is, if there were a human soul, it could shift around this way, and that would be interesting. But there isn't. So it's kind of moot. Like, it's not that complicated to dig into, because I just don't think there is. But
even if you get
compare
into
that to Synecdoche, where you pull apart and it's about the nature of human grief. Well, human grief is real. We can talk about that all day long and continue to unpack it forever and never reach the end.
Well, and if you want to just like throw out the spiritual argument, let's talk about philosophically or psychoanalytically.
Consciousness or whatever.
The idea of a singular ego or a Cartesian subject is a thing that it's kind of a thing. Like we kind of moved past that a while ago, and there's a lot of thinkers who've really, really done some amazing work to push us in different ways of sort of realizing thought. And that kind of thing as, hey, we have a soul and we trade souls is interesting. And I think the film is still interesting. It just doesn't have the philosophical knock-on effect that I think every one of his other films that we've talked about absolutely does. Synecdoche 100% does still. Anomalisa even, which is a fairly simplistic, straightforward story, and I don't think super deep, but I think it has a really interesting implications that actually has knock-on effects. I don't feel it for this one anymore. It's still an amazing movie. Like, it really is, and everyone should see it.
The deepest this one goes, and I do like what the statement it has. It's just things have been, like, other films have made this statement as well. I think is that I think it's the most, honestly, I'll come back and say it's the most self-aware Kaufman, I think. I think the more that he is unchained, the more he is...
It's humble.
He likes the smell of his own stink. Because here it's a little bit like he's just trying to say that egotism, especially, in love especially, is destructive. And we find that all of the flaws of the people in this movie, literally all the main hitters in this movie, their egotism is what breaks everything down, breaks the connection to a soul completely down. That's the metaphor to me, is that you open up this little hatch and you connect to an individual. They all are starved of connection because their ego of their wants, what they think they deserve, gets in the way. Now, I think that that's pretty simple, pretty clear cut. It's not, not necessarily you're not calling home about that. But I also do think that it hits on the point to me that Kaufman's characters, who resoundingly name a Kaufman character in any of his films that isn't an asshole and isn't completely egotistical and kind of like cathartic. That is what he writes. That's what he thinks of itself. It's himself. It's very clear.
I mean, Streep in adaptation, but...
Yeah, not character like
no,
John
your
Malkovich
point's well taken. There's not many
his
of
characters.
Them. There's
Some
not
of
many.
his-
He's a
like,
misanthrope.
Here's a person
He's a
who is
misanthrope.
like an archetype.
Yeah, and he writes misanthropic, unlikable characters.
But
Yeah,
his
that's
people,
his bag, man.
Yeah, people who are like who are protagonists, really.
Yeah.
That's his bag.
Well,
And I
he's
have nothing-
self-loathing, and his protagonists often reflect aspects of himself.
Yeah, exactly. And
But again, I would say Craig is not just unlikable. I find him to be like flatly unlikable.
Craven.
Right.
Oh, boring also? That's
Yeah.
Like
He's
just
boring.
he's not interesting or
he
doing
doesn't
shit.
even think twice.
Well, they're very simple. The love
about-
triangle is as simple as it could be, but it does... there's a few things that were interesting to me. For like, again, it's not a... there is a knock-on effect, but it's really easy, low-hanging fruit wins. For example, Cameron Diaz's reaction to spiritually being in Malkovich for the first time is realizing that they're transsexual. That invites interesting meditation and conversation around the difference between your inner self and outer self as it relates to the transsexual experience. But they don't really follow it up. He's just flagging you know,
It's like the monkey thing.
the theme is
It's like,
identity. The theme
yeah.
is identity, like as the consciousness identity. Monkey is an interesting point.
So I'm gonna
Bird that
flex those
talks is an
muscles.
interesting
Yeah.
point. Gender reassignment is an interesting point. These all touch on identity, but
like
it doesn't
practice.
go. It doesn't go hard. It doesn't go deep.
Well,
into each
and it
direction.
doesn't go in what I would say normally he does. What he does is very sort of biunivocal, one side or the other. She's a woman. She goes in a man. I'm a man now. Oh man, I learned I'm a man. Not the nuanced reality of what it means to be a gender or have gender dysphoria or be trans or be non-binary or deal with gender norms within society. It's, oh, I'm this, I'm that. Or I'm attracted to you. One of the things I actually found really off-putting this time walking around, and it may just be that I was just in a bad mood watching it. It's hard to tell. The people who control Malkovich are the ones who kind of forced their way in, and the idea of like strong will being a thing, and that's stupid. Like,
that Cusack's will is so strong he can puppet Malkovich. Yeah, it's weird.
or that Lester is the one who controls because he's stronger than all the people he brought with him.
See,
I think that's actually. I was going to
bring
that's good.
I was going to bring that up as
that.
I think maybe the most interesting thing to pick up and turn over in my mind is how is the idea of the multiple people, like it's a dozen or so people inhabiting the vessel at one time, because that invites questions of, I actually do believe, or this is where my metaphysical, everyone has a different edge, but this is where we reach my metaphysical edge, where I'm like, I do believe the barriers between our consciousnesses and the idea that we perceive ourselves as individual, I think there's some unreality to that, or some illusory nature.
Absolutely.
I think there's some fuzziness to that. And I think it invites meditation around the idea of, could you put multiple consciousnesses into one body? Is my current consciousness a composite consciousness? Is there any way in which consciousnesses are ever linked or will ever return to a state of connectivity? Or the opposite is just as interesting. Am I a unique universe of perception, hermetically sealed unto myself, that is born from nothing and will vanish and will never contact your perceptive universe in any meaningful way? That's also interesting. So that is irreducible and interesting to think about.
Yes, but again,
the movie
he does nothing with it. Like,
the movie just flags it as a thing you could think about if you take it upon
comes down
yourself.
to, I'm the stronger one, they follow me, I'm leading. It doesn't go into, for example, a simple question. Was Lester also a multiplicity? The body he's currently in.
Right.
But I would assume so.
Are you talking to multitudes? Yeah.
And
so
does
if
that
that's the
imply
case, the next
humanity
time around,
will one day live immortally with all of humanity crammed into one body? Because that could
or
happen,
is it a
right?
really interesting way of saying that we are ultimately, those who come before us, we are a combination of all of them, and the people who've been part of us before our 44th birthday, all the people we deal with our entire lives. The strongest ones are the ones who actually impart the most control on us, and the weaker ones are the ones who don't, but we still have them with us as we travel, and each one of us is ultimately a multiplicity. And at some point, we do seem to harden, and at that point, people may come to us, but we do not respond back to them. Instead, they have to make their way to the new vessel, and they have to find a way to carry on in a new voice.
Right. That's exactly
That's
right.
an amazing meaning.
Ancestral memory makes a composite that becomes you. Yeah.
I reached up my own ass to find that. That's not something they talk about or hint at even in the film.
I would give it to him that he hints at it. That's all he does. Hints at it.
He hints at it. Yeah, that's
he
right.
hints at it because there's multiple people in Malkovich. That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
No, he's also pointing at it with the whole 44 thing. He's pointing at it.
Well, and the fact that the hive.
I need you to look at me. Have you ever made love with someone who adore you with two pairs of eyes
people who
looking
both
through
love
the same
you.
eyes?
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's that concept.
The Malkovich hive mind ends up marrying Florence, the receptionist, who Lester said he was in love with. But again, that just implies that Lester's in control, which simplifies it, which you don't want.
I do
want
to go back to that control thing you're talking about, Brooks, because I would argue that I liked that the more powerful egotistical people in this film are the ones who can control the artifice more, because I think that that's a statement on people who subjugate others with their power rule. It's what Catherine Keener said about passionate ones in this movie. She talks about, there's that whole conversation when they're on their like threesome date that doesn't work out, where she says like, who gives a fuck about those other people who aren't passionate? I only care about the people who like know what they want and then are going to go and get it. And that's her philosophy. That is why she's so self-absorbed.
That's why she ends up going, when he starts taking back over Malkovich's body, she finds him attractive again because he's powerful and able to run it. I get it.
And she doesn't care who it is. She's
just a want machine.
She's just a want machine. And that's the basest level of like, okay, here's the most egotistical version
it's like a
of
puppet
person.
show. They're puppet simple, you know?
Exactly. But Kaufman is saying here, this is actually everybody. Everybody's got a little of this and thinks this a little bit. Thinks this about how, like the selfish nature of humanity. Even if they do want to believe in the altruism of things, they do deep down know that people can take advantage of people like this. And that is what is the vulnerability in love. And that is what having a passageway to another person's brain is doing. By falling in love with someone or yourself, you are... Yes, it can open up and become the relationship of a lifetime, a true moment of clarity in any person's thought. It also can, if you self-absorb to that extent, though, you can become an egotistical Malkovich. So,
but intimacy requires strings attached. Like intimacy opens you up to influence and therefore control by others. But at the same time, you have to decide what the balance is.
And I think that by him kind of posturing and saying like, so of course Malkovich is kind of owned by this power that for some reason, I guess, Cusack has this power. I think he's saying like, because he wanted it so fucking bad. That was the one thing that we knew about him, even as a pathetic, cathartic kind of shitty puppeteer, as you said, which by the way, I don't necessarily agree with. He's actually a fucking impressive puppeteer.
Oh,
he's just a shitty person and not good, like choosing good art.
And he's exactly what Kaufman views himself as, right? Like literally Kaufman sneers at himself and says, I am the artist whose ideas are so pretentious that look at this fucking guy. Fuck him.
This fucking guy. Exactly.
Which is funny because that's the charm of Kaufman, I think, is he pulls off doing that while he is presenting pretentious ideas. But they're ideas that really do have merit. They just happen to be complicated and sophisticated. Except in the case of being John Malkovich, which is a little simpler. But I still think he's doing the thing where he presents a protagonist that's clearly him. Like the puppet show that Craig makes is the movie Being John Malkovich, right? Which then supports the meta loop again. Because he's out there on a street corner doing a stupid puppet show that people are going to look at and go, who's that fucking weirdo? I think that's Kaufman saying, that's what I am, that's what this movie is. I expect you to look at this movie and go, what weirdo thought of this movie? It's almost cloying because I think in retrospect it's like going, it's like a weird kid coming into the room and going, I'm the weird kid, and you're like, show don't tell, weird kid. I do think he has a little of that.
I mean, he always has, but I mean, performers. I'm a performer, so I can say it. He desperately wants attention to make him whole, I'm sure. Yeah, we all do.
As we all do. Yeah.
Welcome to being alienated as a human. But for me, again, so I'll go back. The interesting stuff about this film that's still interesting is one of the things we haven't talked about, and I just love your thoughts, because it's the film is called Being John Malkovich. So the real question I'm going to ask, is anyone actually ever being John Malkovich in this, or are they utilizing him as a puppet for their own being?
I'd argue the second, because he is a vessel.
Yeah.
Well, no, I would say at first only Craig is puppeteering him. Then they're being him. I would argue it is consent, right? It has to do with, it's an issue of autonomous control. If you are the puppeteer, then regardless of the body, I think the traditional view would be soul beats body. If you're the soul that's active, you are that thing.
Yeah.
So is anyone being John Malkovich, or are they being Craig in John Malkovich's body? Which is this
Well,
is the one fun
the
part
di-
I like. Like at
The
what point?
dichotomy you set up though is also entirely how you read the title. So like you being John Malkovich, if you take that as to mean what it is to be John Malkovich versus being John Malkovich, what it is to be acting like you're John Malkovich. Those are two. That's a dichotomy you can split up depending on how you read it. That's what you're pointing out. I think it's kind of a double entendre.
I
think
liked
it's
it.
Meant to be.
I like that part. It's one of the again, I liked so much of this film, but it just doesn't hit me the same way. I like that. I like how clever that is. I like how clever it is across the board. But actually, clever is probably the right word, because I was saying to a friend of mine that I think I've grown tired of clever. Like,
That's a
I
very
feel that, man.
clever
I feel that.
saying.
I think it's when you.
fuck you.
I think look, life is a series of disciplines in my mind, and like when you get into a discipline so deep, that it's like that. You know what it is? Fuck, it's that. Have you guys ever seen that comic where the guy stands on some books? Or no, he's looking. It's like it looks like Far Side, but it's not a Far Side. He's looking at a wall and he can't see shit. And then he stands on some books and he sees like a horribly post-apocalyptic situation where there's like a city burning or something like that. And then
he says, "Fuck these books" or something.
And And then in the third pane, he sees he's got even more books, I guess, and he sees like he's now in the clouds and he sees this heavenly kind of like cloud landscape. That's the original comic. It's become a meme at some point where people say, and then even more books.
I don't understand the meaning of the comic.
Oh, you don't mean that? It's the idea of if you're ignorant in the first stage, you only see a wall. If you read a little bit, you see like the crushing reality of what made that wall. And then if you read even more, you are set free from like all of this. It's the idea of that knowledge and understanding comes with this kind of like ignorance. Like it's not ignorance versus understanding. It's more of like understanding and like how it like can set you free from some of the aspects of like you keep reading.
I gotcha.
Yeah. But like it just reminds me of that, like what Brooks is saying is just that like, yeah, man, when someone says like when I think like, oh, that's clever, sometimes that is exactly what gets me into the rabbit hole of like, that's so fucking clever. I need to understand everything about
and then sometimes discipline. You mean that's and kind of annoying.
And then other times like
mood.
You've read enough or you've seen enough or you've thought about enough and you're like, yeah, let's get past the clever shit.
Well, it's the great line from Fight Club. Oh, it's clever. How's that working out for you?
How's that working out for you? Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it is clever. I think that we have to remember and therefore treat as such. This is like sophomore shit what he's making right now, Kaufman and Spike Jonze. Like they're trying to make kind of like a diet soda of this thing that we then once we started going down the rabbit hole, and it's like, okay, now we're getting into the hard Kaufman, like the adaptations and the like Anomalisa and stuff. Even that's not his best work, but it's now we're really getting into it. This is reserved for the space of like, here's an introductory course.
Yep.
And I think that's fine.
Yeah.
Abe, I searched stack comic wall meme ignorance, and all I can find is an old Marvel comic of an animate wall saying, "No one can stop the wall." And he's hitting an umpire with his body, which is a wall. But anyway, find it and send it to me later.
I'll find it and I'll send it to you later.
That means I am out of things to discuss. Do you guys have final thoughts on Beach Malk?
I have one last note because I didn't get to finish my comment on being John Malkovich. I found a quote from Kaufman that I wanted to be able to quote. So I'm going to do that and end it. Quote, "Well, you are inside someone else's skin, but Craig doesn't have the experience of being Malkovich. He has the experience of using Malkovich. He uses him to be with Maxine, uses Malkovich's notoriety to get his own career going. So really, it's using John Malkovich. Yeah, I'd say it's using John Malkovich." And then he laughs.
Yeah, I mean, that's true about the Craig character.
For sure.
Yeah.
Especially once he starts exerting conscious control. But I wonder, when you're a passenger, aren't you really being that person? You are experiencing their neuronal impulses, right? You're riding along. I don't know. Or is he really being that child?
The essence of being.
At the
That's
end?
the essence of being a passenger.
Look away.
If you ever want to, we can have a discussion all about decentered subjects. Deleuze and Guattari have some great writing in Anti-Oedipus and A Thousand Plateaus we could go over anytime you want.
Hell yeah.
Hey, Brooks, where can people find that if they want to listen to you talk more about those philosophers you just named?
They can go on YouTube and search the Deleuze and Guattari Quarantine Collective. It's a group of almost 3,000 readers that are putting together 17 readings a week and our podcast and all kinds of stuff. So Simondon, Zizek, we have a Bataille group starting soon. Of course, Deleuze and Guattari, Foucault, all those guys. So
Foucault. I know Foucault.
Foucault's great.
Relevant as ever.
Yeah.
All right, I mean, the last thing I will say, sorry, last thing. The last thing I'll say is if...
Wait. We'll put it behind the paywall. Okay, good. A bonus episode. All right, go.
There we go. If you haven't seen Kaufman, this is the place to start. This is the place to start. If you've seen all of Kaufman and not this one, be aware of that going in.
Oh, I would watch it as let's watch his roots and his early, yes, for sure. Or if you just want to laugh, because it's
genuinely funny.
It
is genuinely funny.
Yeah.
And no matter how many times I've seen it, there are scenes that will always make me just smile like a little kid because they're silly and fun.
Yeah, great use of parrot jokes. Parrot jokes are a staple, and there's some good parrot jokes.
There's some amazing,
the implications of what it must have happened for it to
and
say
the timing,
what it says. Yeah.
and the comedic timing is so exceptional.
Yeah,
and it's not that twee of a film.
No, I remember
the marionette shit. But...
I was gonna write the note. I felt myself wanting to write the note even before I started playing the movie in earnest. Seminal to Wes Anderson, because I assumed it was that in my recollection. I don't really think it is. I was pleased to be like, that note doesn't actually apply. Yeah.
As I said in our other conversations, I suggest that the world burn all twee shit.
I like Wes Anderson, but we can talk about that another time.
Yeah.
This is one I will, you know what? I'm going to side with Abe.
All right. Skip school, burn shit, be twee, gain respect. Bye.
Bye.
This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The Beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you!